Well, my profession is engineering, so I'm electronic engineer, and I've been working with spectrum matters for a while. So my master degree was on high frequency systems, and then my PhD was, at the time, we used to call it cognitive radio systems. So I was working on multi-radio transmitters. And then I worked in a Marie Curie postdoc program. I mean, I was a postdoc, but it was a Marie Curie European project on cognitive radio. And then as background, I work at the National Spectrum Agency in Colombia. That's like the spectrum regulator. And I was working there for almost 6 years. At the end, I was the general director of the National Spectrum Agency. And then I moved to DSA. I've been working with the Dynamic Spectrum Alliance for the last 5 years. And it has been very interesting because I moved from the very technical side to the regulatory side. And now I'm more on the industry, with the industry perspective. And I think that's important because we need to put all those puzzle pieces together, because for any successful project, you need the technology, but you also need the regulations, and you need investment and involvement from industry. So I think those are key parts of any successful project. I think it is kind of related to the use of the internet. It's like you have different angles or layers. So spectrum, as you just mentioned in the introduction, is a key element because that's what is needed for any type of wireless communications. But it's not only access to the frequencies, but the way and the framework that enables that type of access. So, for example, in the case of unlicensed, it means that there are rules, but different stakeholders can take advantage of this resource. But then you also have those that are providing the service. And for example, one of the successful things that we have been doing at DSA is working with those local stakeholders that are deploying the networks for affordable broadband connectivity. So that could be community networks, or that could be wireless internet service providers, or that could be also like there are so many users now. You could even have what we call verticals. So that's directly enterprises or sectors that realize that they need direct access to the internet, and they are also trying to find solutions in terms of spectrum access for them to use internet. So as DSA, we try to work with all those stakeholders, and at the same time with the industry that is leading the latest technologies, like for example, Wi-Fi 7, or also spectrum sharing and new solutions for databases, like trying to combine those that are using those technologies to deploy the networks and provide connectivity, those that are at the edge and the top, like also creating technical solutions, and clearly regulators, because they are the ones defining the rules of the game. So we need to make sure that they see that compromise, but again, with universities, with civil society, with experts from all around the world. So that's something I find fascinating. It's like bringing all those experts together to think about the future of spectrum management. It seems so obvious, but but it's not. And the reason why we selected this model is because right now there is a big discussion about the future of technology and the future of networks. And in particular in Europe, there are many discussions about making business sustainable for companies. But what we want to highlight at some point is that the purpose, most of the public policies are really trying to make sure that users are the ones that take advantage of the connectivity. And that's a way for them to transform their lives. So, and when we talk about users, we also try to explain that during the summit, we are not only talking about a final user, end users, but we're also talking about small and medium enterprises. We're also talking about government entities like schools, libraries. So, it's like, because the two elements are related, you need to have a healthy ecosystem so you can attract investment. And then you can have new solutions and affordable connectivity solutions. But that's not the purpose. The purpose is always the end user and how they're really transforming their lives, how they're becoming digital included. So that's what we wanted to highlight. Like, let's not forget the main purpose here. That's the priority. That should be the priority. So if you want to get affordable connectivity and broadband connectivity, there are many technical solutions on the table. You could use terrestrial systems, you could use satellite systems. And then on the terrestrial side, you could have different technologies like mobile, cellular traditional networks, but you could also have more localized access networks, as I was explaining, for example, for enterprises, or you could have solutions such as Wi-Fi. And all of them, even for the user perspective, we are like, okay, I can use them all. As a user, I don't really care which one I'm using as far as I get the service that I need and the prices that I need. But in terms of the spectrum, the discussion is a little bit more complicated, because then it's like sometimes we have different industries trying to get access to the same frequency bands. And that's where it becomes more complicated. So, for example, right now, there is a big discussion about the future of the 6 gigahertz band. That's one. For those that are not really too familiar with spectrum, you can imagine like a big highway, and then you have different lanes. And so, like, traditionally, one lane, for example, is for broadcast, another lane is, for example, for mobile cellular networks, another lane is for satellite. And in this case, the 6 gigahertz band is already used by satellite and fixed links that we call microwave links, but it's not the microwave at home, but the microwave links. And there are also some mobile users. So that band is ideal for Wi-Fi, but it's also, some stakeholders say that band is needed for cellular networks, big cellular traditional networks. So we are having that discussion, and that's the quid of the discussion is like, when we see how people are getting access to the internet, where most of the traffic is going through, in our case, it's clearly much better to consider Wi-Fi as a future technology, and it's a technology that needs this band to evolve. So to answer your question, it's like having these discussions just needs us to be in the position of understanding the user's needs, their perspectives, and also trying to find the best trade-off. And also making sure that every industry is getting what it needs. So, for example, we think that there will be other frequency bands that are ideal for cellular networks, or that have been already dedicated, we call it identified for INT, that are not still completely used. So normally, spectrum is managed like the traditional way. It's called command and control. So if anyone is requesting access to the spectrum, the regulator or the spectrum authority will give a license to that stakeholder and say, okay, you can use this frequency band. It's a public resource, but then you have a permission, the permission to use it for a certain period of time. In some cases, that there is a license fee that is more kind of nominal, but in some cases, those that are receiving that license are making a big business. And then so at the end, they're making profit from that, so they pay for the spectrum license. And in the last years, that has been the case of cellular networks, and we have had what we call spectrum auctions. That has been a very successful model because it enables, like, basically the theory that if you're really going to make a very good use of that resource, you're going to pay for that, and you're going to find the right balance between the valuation and the benefit that you're getting, and that means that you are connecting people. So that's like the traditional model. In spectrum management, sometimes what happens is that that's excellent to provide coverage and good services in places or locations where you have a lot of people, at the same time, like big cities. But then if you cannot make a business case in some locations, like rural areas or isolated areas, then there is no incentive to deploy networks there. And so that's where we have a gap, a kind of a gap, is that we have very good coverage in some places, mainly big cities, but we have underserved or unserved areas where there is not a business case. So what we have been advocating for is for spectrum sharing. So there are different angles. For example, one angle could be use it or share it. So if you are not using the spectrum in that, let's take a particular region that is unconnected, so someone else could do it. And that could be a community, or that could be a wireless internet service provider that could find a way to make it sustainable. There are different ways to make it, and that's a different discussion. But there could be local stakeholders and actors that find a way to provide sustainable connectivity for those communities, for those people. So that needs an innovative framework for spectrum management that considers those particular cases. Another case could be where you have some users in the band, could be, for example, defense. And so they will be there, they will stay there because there is a priority for them, but they're not using the spectrum all the time at the same location. So if you have some type of frameworks that are dynamic or that take into account that information, then you can make the resource available for others with less priority, but then create the opportunities for them to deploy networks. That has been the case, for example, of Citizens Broadband Radio Service in the United States. It's called CBRS. And the principle is that there is a frequency band between 3550, 3700 megahertz that has some primary users that were decided to continue using that band. So that was not clean. I mean, that's the technical term. So when you are going to dedicate a new band for a particular service, you just clean the band. So it was decided that they would remain using the band. But then the framework was created to give the opportunity for other users to come in that band. Mobile network operators, but also local users, like, for example, universities, ports, industries, neutral host. So there are many new users that had the possibility to use that spectrum. And finally, another use case that it's more recent is, again, in the 6 gigahertz band. That band is used for fixed links, fixed microwave links. So basically, if you have a base station somewhere and another base station far away, you just use a link, dedicated link, to connect them. But not only for mobile operators, you also have utilities or military applications. So there are many types of fixed links. And for example, in the case of the United States, there are more than 100,000 fixed links. So there is no way to clean that band. So what the FCC decided to do is to enable the use of that band for unlicensed access, so different technologies such as Wi-Fi. And then when they're connecting outdoors, they just detect who is using the band where, and if there are any free spots or any possibilities of creating new links, that will be used, but always protecting the incumbents. So those are 3 examples of how spectrum sharing could be an enabler for more affordable and better connectivity. One of the things that we face when we discuss with regulators about it is that many times they are driven by the income, right? By the economic income that they can get from spectrum. And well, if you see that if you have the opportunity to auction a spectrum and you will get some revenues, and you say that's a good business, and sometimes we try to explain that might be the case in some cases, but you need to find the good balance. and make sure that different technologies get access to spectrum, because that's going to provide different solutions that are not necessarily competing. They're different, but at the end, the user is requesting them all. So we try, for example, we have done some studies that are available on the DSA website about the economic benefit of unlicensed spectrum. So for example, some regulators say, like, wait, you say that if I give a spectrum for Wi-Fi, it is unlicensed, so I'm not getting any income, compared to, for example, if I give that same spectrum for a mobile, for mobile operators, and then I have an auction and I get a lot of revenue. And so we have the technical studies that prove that at the end, there is a bigger social impact in giving unlicensed sometimes instead of auctioning spectrum. And the reason is because there are different sources of value. So unlicensed spectrum has an effect on the GDP of the countries, on the final consumers, and also on the national producers, like companies of the country. So we try to quantify that, and all the studies are using public information, so anyone could take those data and contrast the results. And from there, we are saying we are proving that in some cases, in cases, it's more advantageous to dedicate more spectrum for unlicensed, especially in the case of the 6 gigahertz band, than, for example, considering some portions of that band for licensed access or for mobile cellular networks. So that's how we try to bring it. And also we are, as I mentioned before, we try to work with local stakeholders, those that are really facing the problem and are doing the homework of connecting the unconnected. Let me take the example of Brazil. So in Brazil, there are many wireless internet service providers. They're called PPPs, so Provedor de Pequeno Porte. And so what they are doing is that they're the ones in every municipality, in small regions, in small towns, connecting people with fixed access. And they have been doing that for a while. They have invested in fiber. Unfortunately, in countries such as Brazil, it's very hard to have fiber to every household, so they still need wireless. But they're the ones doing that. And then when we understand what they need, they give a very clear message. It's like, we need more unlicensed spectrum because that's the only one that we can use. Or we need possibilities to access some type of licensed spectrum on a localized mode. So that, sorry, it also took a little bit longer, but that's how we try to put that together, like to understand the needs of the final users. Also among our members of DSA, for example, we have civil society organizations like New Americas in the US or ISOC. We have been partnering with them for many years. So we also try to really go. We also have a very good collaboration with APC. And different stakeholders that are involved in that type of like understanding of how connectivity really works in rural or isolated areas. Yeah, that's in particular Europe is leading. I think is one of the regions leading this discussion. And again, with the considerations of the future of the 6 gigahertz band, we have been making some studies, and there is a recent publication that shows that if you want to provide indoors connectivity, let me stop here. So most of the internet traffic is indoors, most of it. And the reason is because that's where we spend time working, like at the office or when we are at school or, in fixed locations, or also entertainment. So people are, when they are downloading movies or when they are watching a movie or some multimedia content, most of the time they're at home or at work. So that's where most of the traffic, and we have figures in the case of Europe. So we have from Germany, from many countries, also in the UK, and clearly in the US, that shows that most of the traffic is indoors. So when we think about how we are going to connect people in the future and how we are connecting them and how it will continue to be, we expect that indoors traffic to be most of the traffic of the internet, and to continue like that. Especially now, for example, in Europe, they are isolating buildings to make sure that there is a better, like you keep heat or you keep the temperature inside households. So the best way to connect to provide indoors connectivity is combining fiber and Wi-Fi. Instead of trying to have 3 or 4 commercial mobile networks crossing the walls and providing indoors connectivity. So for example, that's one of the ways that we see that policy decisions could encourage and have a relationship with sustainability. And that's clearly one of the cases, like trying to wherever is possible, wherever is possible, to combine fiber and Wi-Fi instead of trying to provide indoors connectivity only with traditional cellular mobile networks. Yes, we have a very important collaboration with the UK, part of the Digital Access Program. So DSA is one of the global partners of that Digital Access Program. And we have been doing different projects. We have been working on analysis of the current regulations in 5 countries. So those are Brazil, Indonesia, Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa. And there are many very exciting projects. Like, for example, we made a study about wireless internet service providers and the status of them in the 5 countries. We have done, for example, some economic studies for those countries. We have supported technical experts on making coexistence studies. For example, in the case of the 6 gigahertz band, one of the concerns of the regulators were like, okay, if I open that band for licensed XM or unlicensed access, how can I be sure that the fixed links that are using the band or the satellite that are using the band will be protected? So that's what we call coexistence studies. So we have done some of those. And recently, one of the projects we are just finishing now in South Africa is a mentorship program for wireless internet service providers, because it was found that many new wireless internet service providers, they're very active, but then they struggle to continue for more than 1 year. Or in the first couple of years, they have a lot of issues in terms of management and finding, there are many regulations in place. So they need to understand all that. So this mentorship program is with the Association of Wireless Internet Service Providers, and they're helping new WISPs in their path to provide sustainable, affordable connectivity. So there are many small things going on and projects, but it's hard to measure the impact of spectrum regulations, because at the end it's one policy, one decision, but it's really changing lives, and it's really changing the model for providing connectivity. So every time that a regulator is making a decision, enabling more unlicensed spectrum or facilitating spectrum sharing or access for a wider ecosystem, that's something that we really celebrate, because it's like creating the conditions, and we are sure that the ecosystem will grow. So it's in particular, that's one of the projects, but there are many things going on. Well, the future is exciting. That's the first part, because it's evolving all the time. But we think that for whatever 6G will be, and let's call it 6G ecosystem, it will need a mix of technologies and spectrum access frameworks. So it will need a part of licensed access, a part of unlicensed or licensed XM access, and most probably a good part of shared access. Because every time it's becoming harder to find new frequency bands that could be harmonized globally and that could be clean, with no incumbents. That's a challenge that is every time it's harder and harder. So we think that spectrum sharing has a lot to offer in that perspective. And we are very keen to support with the expertise that we have so far in terms of dynamic spectrum access, new solutions, databases. We're also excited about the future of AI and how that will contribute to manage all those data about how spectrum is used and help that for very better decision making and to improve the way that networks operate compared to now. So I think it's an exciting future, and I think I'm convinced that dynamic spectrum access will be and spectrum sharing will be an important piece of that definition.